We are in Luke chapter 9. This will be my last time dealing with the book of Luke with you. Evan is going to finish up our chunk of Luke next Sunday morning, and then we will be moving on to Ephesians after that. Luke chapter 9, verses 28 through 36. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him and went up into a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed. His clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but they became fully awake. They saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what he was saying. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at that time what they had seen. My wife has many great qualities. The best one is her patience with me. Just her patience in general. She's going to be very mad at me for saying this up here. But it's a good thing she's patient. But she is incredibly patient with me. Her greatest gift to me is her ability to find my annoying qualities cute. I don't understand it. I will be deeply obnoxious. And she'll be like, "Oh, you're so cute." And she just laughs it off and moves on in a way that requires a near miraculous level of patience. One such obnoxious quality that I have is an obsession with weird noises. I hate hearing noises. It just drives me nuts. My children hate this about me. My wife's more patient with it than they are. But if someone is tapping, I'm about to go through the roof. If someone is squeaking their chair, oh man, I can't do it. The worst of all, if someone is smacking their mouth while chewing food, I will move to a different country to get away from them. There's a movie I remember watching with my wife many years ago. I think it's called Julie and Julia. It was about Julia Childs. And they made a directorial decision that every time they ate, they would be making smacking noises to, I guess, somehow enhance the movie. That enhanced the movie right into the trash. It was the worst 2.5 to 10 hours of my life. Hate noises. The place that I hate hearing noises the most is in my car or in my house, because I'm also a little bit of an anxious person, and so I assume that noise means I'm about to spend a lot of money fixing something. So we'll be driving down the road, and all of a sudden I'll just say, "Shh, no one talk." Did you hear that? What is that? And no one else can hear it. Because one of my wife's not redeeming qualities is she's not good at finding annoying noises while I'm driving the car. And I hate it. Why do I care so much in the car and in the house? Because those noises tell me that something is wrong. Something's rattling that shouldn't be. Something's not in the right place. And so we listen closely to try and understand it. Maybe you've listened to those car mechanic shows on public radio, and they're always talking about the noise their car is making, and they're trying to replicate it on the radio, or you go into the mechanic, and you're like, "It's making a sound." Because you have to explain the noise, because certainly that's going to tell them exactly what's going on with the car. Well, in this story, God tells us to listen up. There are some noises happening. There are some sounds coming, and they are important for us to hear. And that is his conclusion at the end of this text. And so, as we go through this text this morning, we are going to listen for 3 sounds about Jesus. First of all, let's listen for his glory. Verses 28 through 30. About 8 days after Jesus said this. All right, so if we're already connecting it to the passage before, it's important to think about the passage before from a couple weeks ago. Jesus has told his disciples that he is going to die, and he has told them that discipleship means taking up their cross and following him, basically implying you are also going to die. We're all going to die. They think they're bringing in the Messiah, this mighty conquering king. And Jesus says, yeah, that's true, but also I am going to die. That's the context before this, and it's specifically referenced in this text to bring our minds back there. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him, went up onto a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed. His clothes became bright as a flash of lightning. 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. And so just after the last account of Jesus kind of diminishing the vision of his glory and emphasizing the humiliation that he was headed to, emphasizing the suffering he was heading to, now the disciples are going to get a vision of his glory. They are going to see him in a way that they have not seen him before. It gives us some basic details, not the specifics that we might like to have, but his face somehow changes, and he is clothed in dazzling light. His clothes are like a flash of lightning. So there's this transformation of his appearance, revealing something that has been masked. It's not bringing something new to Jesus. He was like this for all of eternity. But he did not think equality with God something to be grasped, something to be used for his own advantage. So he gives it up and takes upon himself the form of a servant, becomes a humble man. And here we see this flash of what he is in his eternal state, this glorified, glorious being. His face changed, clothed in dazzling light. Along with his glorified appearance, his glorious appearance, we see 2 glorious witnesses, Moses and Elijah. There's quite a bit of discussion about why Moses and Elijah. The text doesn't make it completely and totally undebatably clear here. But there's a few reasons why I think Moses and Elijah are significant characters to appear here. For one thing, they are representative of the Old Testament as a whole. Fast forward a few chapters to Luke 24. On the road to Emmaus, Jesus talks to some disciples, and he expounds the Old Testament to them, explaining how it teaches about him. And the language that Jesus uses to refer to the Old Testament is common language of the time. He calls it the law and the prophets. That's shorthand for the Old Testament, and in Luke's gospel, Jesus uses that shorthand to refer to the Old Testament being written about him, written to bring the story of creation to its center point in the coming of Jesus. Well, who as a person represents the law? Moses is the lawgiver. And so Moses there speaks as the lawgiver. He is representing the law. At the same time, Elijah is a prophet. Elijah is a prophet representing the entirety of the prophets. And so you have this emphasis on Jesus as the fulfillment of the Old Testament. There's some other continuities. There's some other things that are similar between Jesus and these characters. Here he is on a mountain praying, while both Moses and Elijah have kind of mountaintop, literally, experiences in the Old Testament. Moses on Mount Sinai receives the law. Elijah on Mount Carmel defeats the prophets of Baal who follow Jezebel. And now here they have come to another mountain, and they are surrounding Jesus as these representation of God's intervening amongst his people in the Old Testament. Both Moses and Elijah face great opposition. Elijah from the kings of Israel, Moses from both Pharaoh and the Israelites in the wilderness. And both of them have key roles in advancing God's plan through the Old Testament. So what is ultimately happening here in this count is that through their appearance, we are centering our gaze on Jesus as the fulfillment of the Old Testament. Now, this text, falling where it does in the story, needs to be considered. The disciples have just heard from Jesus that they are going to suffer and die. Now it seems that they, up to that point, had this vision of glorious conquest with the Messiah, King Jesus, that did not include a death on the cross, that did not include his humiliation, that did not include him ascending into heaven instead of establishing his kingdom on the earth at the conclusion of his ministry. And so the disciples might be a little bit discouraged at this point. They thought they were latching on to the winning side, and the guy who they think is going to carry the day, the guy they think is going to win, says, hey, you want to be on my team? Well, you're going to die. That's not a team I want to be on. And you can imagine the disciples thinking that, like, okay, so why are we latching ourselves to this guy who says he's going to die? Why do we want to be on his crew if he's going to die, if he is going to be humiliated? And so coming shortly after that, this revelation of where Christ is headed by demonstrating his glory to them is actually incredibly helpful in building up the disciples with an understanding of what their mission is going to be. Jesus shines forth through the darkest clouds. He has told them the dark clouds are coming. He has told them about the suffering that is coming. He's going to tell them in the text you're going to look at next week with Evan that the darkness is coming. He's going to remind them again. Yet through that darkness, Jesus shines forth. He completely defies expectations. The way that the disciples and the crowds that followed Jesus thought he would fulfill the Old Testament is what would be as a glorious conquering king. Yet Jesus is going to fulfill the Old Testament as a silent suffering lamb. Then, one day, as a glorious conquering king. And by giving the disciples this vision of his glory, he is helping them to understand that his path to glory leads to the humiliation on the cross, but from the humiliation on the cross, it leads to his ultimate glorification so that every tongue will confess, so that every knee will bow. And so we have this path going through humiliation to glory, and God gives the disciples this vision of glory, which they are going to need to motivate them as they follow Jesus, because the path of a follower of Jesus will be the same. So we must have confidence in ultimate glory. Otherwise, we will get discouraged and quit and bail out when life is difficult in the short term. Because life will be hard in the short term. So we must listen for his glory. It is the thing that gets us through a world of suffering. It's the thing that gets us through opposition. It gets us through the times when it seems like Jesus is not the conquering king after all. When we look and we see his glorious radiance, when we see his glorified person, it enables us to follow him through the hard times, through the times when we are uncertain. And so we must listen for his glory. Secondly, we ought to listen for his plan. Verse 31. They spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. As the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. He did not know what he was saying. So Jesus has a conversation with Moses and Elijah. And this conversation has a specific topic. They are talking about what his plan is, and it says they spoke about his departure, which he was about to bring to fulfillment at Jerusalem. Again, this is evoking some concepts from the Old Testament. The word translated departure here, if we just take the Greek language spelling and transfer it into English, the word is Exodus. It is talking about his exodus, a second exodus, a fulfillment of the Old Testament as Jesus echoes what has gone before. God has a plan to save his people through suffering. There is going to be suffering, but this is ultimately a plan of exodus, a plan of deliverance. If you think back to the Old Testament, the way that God saved his people in the Exodus has a lot of similarities with the way that Jesus saves his people in the New Testament. They are fleeing, they're running away, they are trapped, they're in a hopeless situation, they face incredible amounts of suffering and difficulty, yet God miraculously brings them through the Red Sea, sustains them in the wilderness, and brings them into the Promised Land. In the same way, Jesus is being opposed, he's being resisted, yet God brings him through that, brings him even through the grave, and raises him again and brings him up to heaven. And so Jesus is this second Exodus. He's carrying forward the plan that God has had from the beginning. And the disciples need to hear it. The disciples need to recognize that this prediction that Jesus is going to die is not a failure of God's perfect plan. It's actually God's perfect plan working out exactly as he planned. And so we see the disciples' reactions. I don't know, Luke might have had a beef with Peter or something while he was writing this, because he makes Peter look pretty funny. So you see in verse 32, Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but they became fully awake. When they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. So what a way to wake up from a nap. I think my first impulse would be, I'm not awake from my nap. I'm still sleeping. But Peter and his friends fall asleep. This is going to happen again. They have a tendency of falling asleep at times where big stuff is happening. I don't know if we got some narcolepsy going on. Maybe they just need to eat better, have better sleep routines. I'd like to see their Fitbit information on their sleep score. But Peter's out cold. He wakes up, he's like, whoa, Jesus is glowing. I don't know how he recognized Moses and Elijah. Like, did he have a picture? Like, I don't know. But he sees Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus, and he's a little confused. And Peter, God bless Peter, I sympathize with him. When Peter's a little confused, he does something it's generally best not to do when we're a little confused. He just starts talking. Maybe some of you can identify with that. Like, the more awkward the situation, the more you talk, and the more awkward you make the situation, because you just keep talking and talking and talking, and you just stick your foot farther and farther down your throat. That is Peter. That is Peter. The other accounts give a little more detail. The other Gospels give a little more detail. But as he's talking, he doesn't even know what he's saying. He has no idea what he's talking about. He's just like, well, someone's got to talk because Jesus is glowing and Elijah and Moses are standing there. We can't just sit here and shut up. Like, that would just not work. It probably would have been a good option, not the option that Peter is prone to take, though. And he is still resistant to Jesus' plan. In other gospel accounts, there's going to be times where where Peter opposes Jesus' plan, and Jesus' response is, "Get behind me, Satan." Peter doesn't want Jesus to go to the cross. So you can think Peter has been told Jesus is going to the cross. He doesn't want Jesus to go to the cross. He doesn't want Jesus to die. He sees this miraculous moment, this transfiguration. Moses and Elijah are there, and he's like, let's build them some tents so that we hold this moment forever. Now, there's a couple problems with Peter's plan. The first problem is that he's trying to hold on to something that he has already been told is going to depart. He already knows Jesus is supposed to leave. He's there talking about his departure. He's talking about his exodus. And Peter's like, okay, let's get a tent so that you can stay here for a while. He is resisting God's plan. The other problem is Jesus shouldn't be getting an equal tent with Elijah and Moses. Jesus, Elijah, and Moses are not peers. Elijah and Moses are there bearing witness to the superior Jesus, whereas Peter says, let's just build you each 3 tents. He misses the point. He misses the plan. He's not quite listening yet. And frankly, I get it. They want the glory. Peter sees this. He's like, that's why I'm following Jesus. You're saying, follow me by taking up your cross and dying. That is not what I am here for. I am here for the glowing face talking to Moses and Elijah bit. That's what I want, Peter says. And so he tries to hold on to it. And certainly, I think we can sympathize with him. He's been told he's going to walk the same path. So he is motivated to get Jesus not to walk down that path. And he is resistant to the plan. Yet the reality is, Jesus' plan is Peter's only hope. If Jesus doesn't come as a suffering Savior, it is bad news when he comes as a conquering King. He will come and he will conquer his enemies. And the only way you're not on that enemy list is through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ for you. So when Peter's sitting here, he's like, hey, Jesus. Whoa. Like you a lot. Respect you a lot. In fact, I think you are the Messiah. But your strategy needs some work. Let's rethink this and come up with a plan that doesn't involve me getting nailed to a piece of wood and suffocating to death. All right? Let's just come up with other options. Yet the plan Peter needs to hear is the plan on Jesus' terms, not on his. The path that goes through death and suffering and humiliation, not the path that goes only to glory. Now, ultimately, glory is the end. Every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. That's the path that we're headed down. That's where we're going. But Peter doesn't want to go the long way to get there. He wants to take a shortcut. We are often in the same boat as Peter. We live in the most prosperous country at one of the most prosperous times in all of history. We think often that we are owed a level of comfort and prosperity that would be unimaginable for the wealthiest person 200 years ago. And because of that, we tend to be entitled in how we think about what God is doing in our life. God owes me a certain level of health. God owes me a certain level of financial comfort and stability. God owes me all these things. Yet the reality is that the life following Jesus is a life on his terms that goes through his path, and his path is a path of humiliation and self-sacrifice. And we must hear from Jesus that his plan is not like our plan. His plan is better than our plan, but it often feels worse in the short term. It often involves suffering and pain and loss and worry and anxiety, uncertainty. All of the emotions we don't want to feel are often there when we follow after Christ. But we need his plan on his terms, not our own. So as we hear Jesus going about his mission, we ought to listen for his plan. Finally, we ought to listen for his identity. Listen for his identity. Verse 34. While he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. A voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen, listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at that time what they had seen. So now, God speaks from heaven. God speaks from heaven and says three things about Jesus. First of all, it says, "This is my son." This is my son. Who is Jesus? He is the Son of God. This is important because this is fundamentally who Jesus is as a distinct person in the Trinity. The thing that distinguishes the members from the Trinity must be their relationships with each other. And Jesus' fundamental identity is the only begotten of the Father. Begotten, not made. He's not created, but the language of only begotten permeates the New Testament, that Jesus, as his identity as a member of the Trinity, is the one who is begotten. He is the one who is Son. The Father is not Son. The Spirit is not Son. Only the Son is Son. He is unique and he is fully divine. He relates to the Father in an eternal begottenness, an eternal sonship and relationship to the Father. And so this is important because it tells us what his identity is. It's important because it tells us that God is in approval of his ministry. Saying, "This is my son," saying, "I'm proud of him. This is the one who has my approval. This is the one who is precious to me. This is my son. He is placing his blessing on his ministry, affirming him just like he did at his baptism, that this is the plan. This is how this is going to come to pass. But it also emphasizes the preciousness of Jesus. He is precious to his Father. Unlike God, I am not a perfect father. So I don't have a perfect relationship with my kids. Yet in some small sense, the extraordinary love I feel for my kids images the love that God says he has for his son here. Mine is much less. It's much more fragile. It is tinged with selfishness and shortcoming and failure. Yet, as a father, I deeply love my children. Last night was just a wonderful night for me and my daughter Ainsley. For her 12th birthday, I took her to a concert in Chicago of her and my favorite band, the Grey Havens. You probably haven't heard of them. If you have, he was also at the concert. But we really, both of us really, really liked this. And so I took just me and Ainsley. We drove down to Chicago. We went out for dinner at Zupa's because she wanted the chocolate-covered strawberry and had just a wonderful, wonderful time. We loved driving down. We listened to music. She listened to some of the popular music and then complained that it was catchy but shallow. Complaining about shallow worship music is my love language. And so she and I talked, and I probably talked too much about history for her liking. And then we got there and we sat down at the concert, and she was so excited. And she's listening, and the whole time she just snuggles her head on my shoulder as we're sitting and listening, and my dad heart is just melting the whole time. And as I'm sitting there, I have this realization. I wish I could bottle this night and take a sip from it for the rest of my life and relive it and remember it. It's such a special time. And I'm feeling right now, as my kids are entering those teenage years, one kid started driver's ed this week, I'm feeling like the clock's ticking. The clock's ticking. I'm going to really enjoy it when it's just me and my wife. But man, I'm going to miss this. And I'm just sitting there all night thinking about how precious it is to be able to spend this time with her. And we get to the opening bands are done, and the main band, the Grey Havens, is up, and he gets up and he starts introducing a song, and he says this. He says, "My son just turned 10. I'm like, uh-oh. He says, and I feel like a giant hand hit a chess timer, counting down the minutes until he's gone. I'm over halfway done with him. And as I was thinking about that, I wrote this song. I'm like, oh no. And Ainsley's sitting next to me. She looks at me, she pokes me. You're crying, Dad. And he sang a song that developed some ideas from Isaac Watts' line where he says, time like an ever-rolling stream bears all its sons away to death. It's a dark line. But the song, and if you don't like dark stuff, it's super encouraging, but also sad. And he sings this song about wanting to be where the living's deep. If time's like a stream, he wants to be in the deep water, and he wants to stay there. And I'm overwhelmed at that moment. Like, what a precious moment with my daughter, who I love so much and is growing into a wonderful young woman. She gets annoyed with the same things I get annoyed with. She's fun to talk to and spend time with. That is how God describes Jesus. That love of a father for his child. That precious love. And mine is a shadow. His is the real thing. Mine bears all the corruption that my sinful heart brings to the table. My love for my children is affected by irritability and my hatred of noises. My love for my children is limited, but his love for his son is not limited. And as he looks down on him and speaks from the cloud, "This is my son," but he goes on. And he doesn't just stop with "This is my son, whom I have chosen." Now, this line can be a little confusing to us. Is it saying that he chose him as his son? Well, that would really do some damage to the deity of Christ, right? So that's obviously not what he's saying. What is he talking about chosen? Well, chosen has to do with the very path that we are in the middle of emphasizing. He is the chosen one, chosen to be a sacrifice, chosen to be given for his people, chosen to suffer, chosen to die. Now take those two lines and put them next to each other. This is my son, the one I love, the one I care for, the one most precious to me, my only begotten son, whom I have chosen to die, whom I have chosen to give away for the world. And then the third part of this line, listen to him. Put all three of those together in your mind and consider the weight of what God is saying. This is the son who I love, who is precious to me, who is so important to me, who is so valued. He is the only one I have, yet I have chosen to give him for you, Peter. I've chosen to give him for you. Listen. Listen to him. Understand who he is. Listen to this son. Listen to him because he is a precious son. Listen to him because he is your only hope. Listen to him. God speaks and he calls to Peter, and through Peter calls to us. Listen to Jesus. He is a precious, beloved son, and in spite of how loved he is by his Father, he is given. He is given to us, and we think about him for an hour on Sunday morning. And we think, oh, he's a good teacher, a good example. But we miss out on the fact that he is a chosen sacrifice, given as a bloody, dying sacrifice, crucified on the cross for us. Listen to him. Hear him. He is glorious. He is the fulfillment of God's plan. He is God's precious son. Listen to him. Hear him for who he is. He is King. He is Lord. He is Creator. He is Savior. Hear all of who he is. Accept him, believe him, obey him, and follow him because he is God's precious chosen one, the one who is given for your sin. Yet how often do we plug our ears? Like two children who don't want to hear one another insulting each other, so they just plug their ears and shout at each other. And we plug our ears because we don't want to hear someone who says he's king, that he deserves ownership of us, that he has demands for our life. We don't want that. We want the glory without the Savior. Unstop your ears and listen to Jesus. He is the King. He is the Lord. He has given himself for you. Believe in him and him alone. Listen to him. For those of us who are believers, for those of us who have listened to him, the time to listen has not stopped just because you believed, just because you started your Christian life. Continue on listening to him. Remind yourself regularly of what he has said. Hear him and listen to him, because we have a tendency to not listen, he has given us a gift. I'll ask our worship team to come up at this time. He has given us a gift in the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper is another way that he speaks to us and he calls us to listen to him. Paul in 1 Corinthians 11 concludes his conversation about the Lord's Supper by saying, "Thus we proclaim his death until he comes." This is a time for us to proclaim who he is to one another, to listen to him, to partake of him, to be nourished by him, hearing who he is and what he has done. In a few moments, we're going to sing, and the ushers are going to pass out the elements. This is something for those who are believers in Jesus. If you are a guest and not a believer in Jesus, we're really glad that you are with us. But we ask that you not participate in communion with us. Just let the plate pass you by. This is for believers. If you are a guest who is a believer in Jesus, you are welcome to join us in participating. But we have an opportunity this morning to listen to him, to hear him, to behold him, who he is, what he has done. So at this time, I'll ask the ushers to come forward to distribute the elements as our worship team leads us in a song. I just hang on to them. Once we are done singing, I'll come back up and lead us in partaking of the elements.